great house of Westridge held a ball that night, the first in 3 years. Everyone came to it, but the one person the whole evening would turn upon. She was not a guest. She could never have been a guest. She was the new under-housemaid, 6 weeks in the place, and she spent the ball as she spent all her hours, invisible, carrying the things other people wanted, taking away the things other people had done with. There is no one in England so unseen as a good servant at a great ball. The guests looked through her the way they looked through a doorway. She had learned, in a hard year, to be looked through. She had come to be grateful for it. A woman who is looked through is a woman who is not looked at, and being looked at was the one thing she could not now afford. Her name was Margaret Felbridge. She was 22, and there was more to her than a new under-housemaid ought to have, though no one at Westridge had yet troubled to notice it. She spoke too well. She carried herself too straight. She had a way of setting down a tray, of folding a cloth, of answering a sharp word that did not belong to the scullery. The older servants had remarked it among themselves. They set it down, as servants will, to airs, and disliked her a little for it. Margaret let them dislike her. It was safer than being asked where she had learned her letters, or why a gentlewoman's daughter was blacking grates in a house at the edge of the moor. Below stairs, before the ball, the servants' hall had been a warm crush of nerves and borrowed finery. The housekeeper drilled the footmen. The cook swore over her sauces. And in the middle of it, unregarded, Margaret carried and fetched, and did the work no one else would stop to do. Quick and quiet and thin, too thin. The cook had said so, that very evening, watching her go by with a laden tray. "That one eats nothing," she said to the housekeeper. "Works like a horse and eats like a bird. It isn't natural. And where does she take herself of an evening, I should like to know, when a Christian girl would be by the fire?" The housekeeper had said nothing, only watched the new maid go, and thought her own thoughts. Upstairs, the Duke of Dunwood watched her leave. He had not meant to watch her. He had not meant to watch anyone. He stood at the edge of his own ballroom, with a glass he did not drink, and let the evening wash over him without touching him. It was the way he took most evenings now. Jonathan, Duke of Dunwood, was 30 years old. He had a hard, handsome face and clear green eyes that gave very little away. He had learned, in a hard life for all its grandeur, to watch a room the way a man watches weather he does not trust. He had reason. He had been robbed once by a steward he had loved like a father. He had been courted all his life by people who wanted the dukedom and called it wanting him. And 2 years before, he had come home from burying a brother in a foreign field, and had not, since, found much in any room worth the trouble of feeling. At his elbow all evening had been Lady Celeste Marbury, seeing to it that he did not forget she was there. She was very beautiful, and she meant to be his duchess, and she had the patience of a woman who has decided a thing is owed her. He was civil to her. He was civil to everyone. It cost him nothing, and gave nothing, and she had not yet understood that the civility was a door, not a welcome. So he watched, out of habit. And because he watched, he saw the thing no one else saw. He saw the new housemaid slip quietly through a servant's door, and out into the dark. It was the very height of the ball. The music loudest, the floor full, every eye in the house turned inward on the glitter. It was nothing, a maid stepping out for air. He told himself it was nothing, and turned back to his guests, and forgot it for an hour. And then, later, he stood at a tall, dark window with his back to the light, and happened to look out across the black park toward the moor. And he saw, far off, a small, moving light. It was a lantern. It went steadily away from the house, across the park, toward the ruined edge of the estate, where nothing stood but an old keeper's cottage that had been empty 20 years. He watched it go. It did not waver or wander, the way a light wanders when its carrier is idle or lost. It went straight and purposeful into the dark, as though it went to something. As though it went to something it went to every night. And Jonathan of Dunwood, who trusted nothing and no one, felt the old cold suspicion wake in him. A new maid who slips out of a ball to walk half a mile across a dark park to an empty ruin, alone with a purpose, is a maid with a secret. And a servant with a secret, in his experience, was a servant who would cost him something in the end. He did not know yet how wrong he was about the cost, or in which direction. Margaret Felbridge had not always blacked grates. She did not let herself think of the before, as a rule. Thinking of it did no good, and cost strength she could not spare. But it was there, under the servant, the way a drowned village is there under a still lake. A gentleman's house in another county. A father who had called her his clever girl and taught her Greek to spite the neighbours. A brother, 2 years older, Tom, golden and laughing, the whole family's pride. Then the crash. Not one crash, but a slow one. A bank gone, a debt called, a father dead of the worry of it. The house and its Greek books and its good beds sold from under her at the door, while men she had never met carried out the furniture. And Tom already gone for a soldier by then, gone to make his own way since there was nothing left to inherit but debt. And then the letter, killed in action. Deeply regret. His effects to follow. She had not believed it. She could not have said why. The county believed it, and mourned him decently, and moved on. Margaret did not believe it, and could not have told a soul the reason, for the reason was only a feeling in the chest, and a feeling in the chest is not evidence. But she had been right. 8 months later, a broken thing on crutches had come to the door of the cheap lodging where she scraped a living with her needle. A thing with Tom's eyes in a face she barely knew. Taken for dead on the field, left among the dead, found alive by a burying party. Months in a foreign hospital. Sent home at last a cripple, with no papers and no pension anyone would honour, and a horror in him that would not let him sleep. She had one thought, holding him in the doorway. They must not know. If the world learned that the dead Ensign Felbridge was alive, the creditors would fall on his pension, such as it was. The parish would want him for a pauper. The county would come to look at the ruin of the golden boy, and pity would finish him where the war had not. He could not be seen. He could not be known. He must be hidden and fed and mended in secret by someone who asked nothing and told no one until he was strong enough to be a person again. There was only one person in the world to do it. So Margaret Felbridge had put away her needle and her name and the last of her pride. She looked for a place. Not any place. A place with an empty corner near it. A forgotten cottage. A ruin where a hidden man might lie. Westridge, at the edge of the moor, had an old keeper's cottage 20 years empty, and it wanted an under-housemaid, and it was far from anyone who had known the Felbridges. She had walked Tom to the ruin by night, and settled him. She had gone up to the great house in the morning and asked for the post. She got it and begun. That had been 6 weeks ago. It felt like 6 years. The stealing was the part that shamed her, and the part she would not stop. She had tried, at first, to feed him on her wages alone, and found it could not be done. Not and keep him mending. Not on a maid's pay. So she took a little. Never much. A heel from a loaf that would go stale. A cut off a joint the family had done with. Scraps and ends, the things a great kitchen throws to the pigs. She told herself it was only the pig's portion. She knew it was not, and took it anyway. She carried it out across the dark with her heart in her mouth and fed it to her brother. And she called it, in the ledger of her own conscience, a debt the world owed her that she was collecting in bread. She was nearly caught once that 5th week. She had the cold meat in her apron, and the cook turned back for her spectacles, and Margaret stood in the larder with her heart slamming and her whole future in the fold of a cloth. The cook found her spectacles and grumbled and went and did not look at her. Margaret had gone out into the dark that night, shaking so hard she could barely hold the lantern. She wept the whole half-mile silently. Then she wiped her face and went in to Tom and was steady. Being steady for Tom was the one thing she never let herself fail at, whatever it cost. That was the woman the Duke of Dunwood had begun to suspect of a sordid intrigue. He did not know it yet, but he would. The whispers began within the week, and they began, as such things do, from the kitchen. Food was going missing. Not much, and not valuable. A heel of bread here, a cut of cold meat, a twist of tea, a screw of sugar, a few apples from the store. The cook noticed it. The housekeeper noticed it. And because a great house cannot abide a mystery in its larder, they set themselves to catch the thief. It did not take them long. The food went missing on the evenings the new maid took her walk, and the new maid, alone among the servants, never took her half-day. She never went to the village. She never wrote or received a letter. And she had, since she came, grown noticeably thinner, as though the food she carried out of the house was not food she meant to eat herself. The housekeeper was a fair woman. She said nothing yet, for a suspicion is not a proof. But there was another at Westridge that season, who was not fair at all. Once she had the scent of it, she made it her business to see that the thing came to the Duke's ears in the worst possible shape. Her name was Lady Celeste Marbury, and she had come to Westridge in the autumn as the guest of the Duke's grandmother, and she had come with an object. The object was the Duke. She was very beautiful. That was the first thing anyone said of her, and often the last, for the beauty was so complete and so cold that it left little room for anything else. She was of good family and small fortune. She had reached the age of 26 without securing the great match her beauty had always promised, and she had fixed, with the whole force of a nature that had learned to be afraid, upon the Duke of Dunwood as her last, best, final chance. She meant to be his Duchess. She had told herself so many times that it had stopped being an ambition and become, in her own mind, very nearly a right. And a woman defending what she believes to be her right is a more dangerous thing than any thief. She had seen the Duke watch the maid leave the ball. She missed very little, Lady Celeste, where the Duke was concerned. She had seen his green eyes follow the little light across the park. She had marked the exact quality of the attention in them, and she had not liked it. It was not the attention a man gives a servant. It was the attention a man gives a puzzle he means to solve. And a man who solves a puzzle is a man who has begun to be interested. Interest was the one thing Lady Celeste could not permit the Duke to feel toward any woman but herself. So when the whispers of the larder reached her, she took them up as a gift. She carried them to the Duke sharpened. "I would not speak of it," she said to him one grey afternoon in the library, having arranged with some care to find him there alone. "It is only that I should not forgive myself if something were amiss in your house, and I had held my tongue out of delicacy." She let a small, troubled sigh do part of the work. "The new maid, the Felbridge girl. Your people are too loyal to trouble you with it. But I am only a guest, and I may say what they may not. There is talk, Duke. Food gone from your larder on the nights she walks out. And she does walk out every night, alone, across your park, to that ruin on the moor. A young woman. Alone, at night, to a place where a young woman can have no honest business." She lowered her lovely eyes. "One does not like to think it, but one hears she is not what she seems, that she came here under a plain name from no one knows where, that there is a man she goes to. A servant who steals to feed a man she meets in secret is a servant who will bring shame on a house. I say it only for your sake. I would rather be thought unkind than see you deceived." The Duke heard her out in silence. He had a great capacity for silence, and he used it now. Lady Celeste, who could read most faces, could not read his. He thanked her, gravely, for her concern. He said he would look into it, and he gave her nothing else. No anger, no gratitude, no promise. She left the library dissatisfied and a little afraid, for she had loosed her arrow and had not seen it strike. But it had struck. The Duke sat on alone in the darkening library. He turned the thing over in his cold, suspicious mind, and every part of it fitted the shape of the thing he had spent his life learning to expect. A servant not what she seemed, a false plain name, theft, a man in secret. He had been robbed before by people he had trusted. He had learned that the ones who seem too fine for their place are the ones to watch, that the straight back and the good speech are as often the marks of a cheat as of a lady. He told himself, sitting in the dark, that Lady Celeste was very probably right, that he had been a fool to feel, even for an hour, that flicker of interest in a thieving maid. And he resolved to do the thing he did with everything he did not trust. He would see it for himself. He would follow her and find out. He followed her the next evening. It was the last evening he would ever be the man he had been that morning. She came out of the house at the usual hour, when her work was done and the family at dinner. She carried her small shielded lantern and a bundle wrapped in a cloth. And she went, as the little light had told him she went, straight across the dark park toward the moor. He kept well back. He had learned, in the war, to follow a thing across broken ground in the dark without being marked, and the skill came back to him now. He went after the small, steady light, with a cold, sick certainty that he was about to catch a thief and a liar in the act. And under the certainty was a colder feeling he could not name, and did not like, and had felt for the first time watching her slip out of his ball. The light led him half a mile to the ruined keeper's cottage on the edge of the moor, where nothing had lived in 20 years. It was not a ruin. That was the first thing that was wrong with his certainty. From a distance, it was a ruin, a black shape against the last of the sky. But close to, he saw that one room of it had been made weathertight. The broken window stopped with sacking and board, the fallen door propped and hung. From within that one room came a faint warmth of firelight through the sacking. And, as he stood in the cold dark a little way off, the low sound of a voice. 2 voices. Hers, low and steady. And another, a man's, cracked and thin and frightened. The cold certainty in the Duke turned over and became something else. He had come to catch a maid at a lovers' meeting or a fence's business. He stood outside a stopped-up ruin, listening to a young woman speak to a man in the particular voice a person uses to someone very ill. And he found he could not now simply throw open the door and be right. He moved close to the sacking, ashamed of himself and unable to stop, and he looked through the gap where the board did not quite meet. And he saw the thing that undid him. There was a man in the cottage, and the man was a soldier, and the man was dying, or had been dying, and was being kept alive by main force of love. He lay on a low pallet by a small, careful fire. He was young, younger than the Duke, though it was hard to tell, for war and pain had aged him past his years. One leg was gone below the knee. The other was bound and splintered. His face was hollow and grey. His eyes, when they opened, were the eyes the Duke had seen on men who had been too long where men should not go, and had come back with a part of themselves left behind. He was shaking. He was always shaking, the Duke would learn, in the bad hours after dark. And the maid, the new under-housemaid, was kneeling by him, unwrapping the bundle she had carried across the park. The bread, the meat, the twist of tea she had taken from the Duke's larder. She was feeding him with her own hands, a little at a time, and she was talking to him low and steady all the while. Of nothing, of everything, of the small doings of the house, of the weather, of the spring that was coming. Anything to hold his frightened mind above the black water it kept sinking toward. "There," she said. "There now, a little more. You must eat, Tom, or all my thieving is for nothing, and I shall have blacked 40 grates for a man who will not so much as chew. Eat, and I will tell you about the ball. There was a ball tonight, the first in 3 years. I could hear the music from the back stairs. I stood a moment and listened to it. I thought how you used to dance. Do you remember? How no girl in the county would sit down while you were on your feet." Her voice caught and steadied. She had a great gift for steadying her voice. The Duke would come to know it well. "You will dance again. When your leg is knit and you are strong, you will. I have promised it, and I do not break my promises, as you very well know, you tiresome creature. So eat, let me get you strong, and one day I will stand at the edge of a ball and watch you dance, and I will not be carrying anyone's tray." The man, Tom, ate a little. To please her, the Duke could see, and not because he wanted it. And then he said the thing that took the last of the ground out from under the Duke of Dunwood. "You should let me die, Meg," he said, in his cracked, thin voice. "You should have let me die out there. You are starving yourself to keep half a man alive in a ruin. You have thrown away your whole life to nurse a thing the world thinks is dead already. Let me be dead. Go and live. I am not worth what you are paying for me." And the maid took his grey face in her two roughened hands. She said, fierce and low, and with her whole heart, "You are worth everything I have, and everything I am. I would pay it all again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day of my life, and count it cheap. You are my brother. You are all the family I have left in the world. They wrote you dead, and I did not believe them, and I was right not to believe them, for here you are. I will not let you die, because the world finds it convenient. The world has found a great many things convenient at our expense. I am done. Do you hear me? I am done obliging it. You will live. If I have to steal every loaf in Westridge and black every grate in England, you will live. Now stop talking nonsense and eat your supper." Outside in the dark, the Duke of Dunwood stood with his hand against the cold stone of the ruin. He found that he could not see. He did not, for a moment, understand why. Then he put his hand to his own face and found it wet. He had a brother once, Harry, younger, brighter, better loved, the one the whole house had turned toward, the way a room turns toward a fire. Harry had gone for a soldier, against everyone's wishes, laughing, sure he was immortal, as the young are sure. And Harry had died in the mud of a foreign field 2 years before. The Duke had brought home a coffin, and a sword, and a folded coat. And he had never, in the 2 years since, been able to speak his brother's name aloud. He had told himself he had done everything a brother could do. He had bought Harry's commission, paid Harry's debts, given Harry everything the dukedom could give. He had not gone with him. He had not been there. He had been safe and grand at Westridge, being a duke, while his brother died alone among strangers. No one had held Harry's face in 2 hands in the dark, and told him he was worth everything and would live. No one had thieved bread to keep Harry breathing 1 more day. Harry had simply died, conveniently, as the world found convenient, and the world had gone on. And here, in a ruin on the edge of his own moor, a housemaid was refusing, with her whole starved body and her whole fierce heart, to let the world have its convenience. She was doing the thing the Duke had not done. She was staying. She was paying. She was keeping a broken soldier alive by main strength of love, and stealing his own bread to do it. And he had come out across the park to catch her at a crime. He went back to the house in the dark. He did not sleep. And in the morning he was not the man he had been. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Everything was explained now. That was the strange, calm center of the storm in him. Everything the suspicion had built was thrown down, and in its place stood the truth. And the truth explained everything the lie had explained, and more. The good speech and the straight back. She was gently born, then fallen, not through vice, but through the same wave of ruin that had swallowed so many when the war and its debts came home. The false plain name, to hide, to keep her broken brother from the creditors, or the shame, or the pity that would finish what the war had begun. The thieving, bread for a dying man. The nightly walk to the ruin. A sister crossing a dark park to a brother the world had written off. The thinness. She gave him her own food. The guardedness. The airs the servants disliked. All of it, every part of it, was the armor of a woman carrying a secret, too heavy and too precious to risk. Lady Celeste had said the maid was not what she seemed. Lady Celeste had been more right than she knew, and more wrong The maid was not a thieving schemer with a man in secret. She was something the Duke of Dunwood had stopped believing existed. She was a person who loved someone more than she loved her own life, and proved it in the cold every single night, and asked nothing, and told no one. He did not know that morning what he meant to do. He knew only what he could not do. He could not have her turned off for the theft, and the brother taken up and disposed of by the parish or the law. He could no more do that than he could have dug up Harry's grave. But neither did he know how to do the other thing, the thing his whole changed heart pulled him toward, for he did not yet have a name for what that thing was. So he did what such a man does when his heart has outrun his understanding. He began, quietly, without a word to anyone, to help. It was easily done, for a duke, and impossible to trace, which suited him. A physician came through the county that week, an army surgeon the Duke knew from the war, and happened, quite by chance, to call at a certain ruined cottage. He took a great interest in a certain wounded man. He came again, and brought what was needed, all his fees settled by a hand the sister never saw. The larder at Westridge, by the housekeeper's report, ceased quite suddenly to lose its food, though no thief had been caught. What no one but the Duke knew was that a standing order had gone privately to the cook. A basket was to be made up each evening. Good bread, meat, and broth, and what an invalid could take. It was to be left where a certain maid could find it on her way out. No questions asked, no word said. The sacking came down from the cottage window, and glass went in. The propped door was hung true. A load of dry wood appeared in the lean-to, and none of it by any hand that could be named. But the deeds were not enough for him, and this was the thing that surprised the Duke most about himself. He had done his helping at a distance all his life. It was the safe way, the clean way, the way that asked nothing of him but money, which he had in plenty and valued little. And he found that winter that the distance had stopped being enough. He wanted to see the man. He told himself it was to judge the surgeon's progress. It was not. It was something he could not have named, and did not try to. So he went one afternoon when he knew the maid was safe at her work in the house. He went alone and plainly dressed. He did not send his name ahead, for the man in the cottage did not know there was a duke in the case at all. He knocked at the mended door, and when the cracked voice bid him enter, he went in and sat down on the stool by the pallet. He told the wounded soldier that he was a neighbour who had heard there was an old campaigner hereabouts, and had come to pass an hour. It was the strangest hour of the Duke of Dunwood's life, and one of the most necessary, for Tom Felbridge, starved of any company but his sister's, and too courteous even in ruin to turn away a caller, talked. He talked of the war. He talked of it the way such men talk to another man who has been there and will not flinch. Plainly, without varnish. Of the mud, the waiting, the noise, and the friends who were there at breakfast and gone by dark. And the Duke, who had never once been able to speak of the war or of Harry, found himself for the first time in 2 years in a room where the thing could be spoken. He did not speak of Harry, not yet, but he sat in the small, warm ruin and listened to a broken ensign talk of the field where his brother had died. And it was as though a door long nailed shut had come a little open and let in air. "You lost someone out there," Tom said at last, not as a question. He had the terrible clear sight of men who have been to the edge. I know the look. My sister has it about our father. You have it about a soldier. My brother? Said the Duke. It came out before he could stop it. It was the second time in his life he had said it aloud, and the first had been in the dark outside this same cottage, to no one. 2 years ago. I was not there. Tom was quiet a moment. Then he said the thing that the Duke would carry for the rest of his days. It is a hard thing, not to be there. I will tell you, though, since you have sat an hour with a stranger and not once looked at my leg. Most of the men I saw go, went quick, and went thinking of home, and of the ones at home, not of who was or was not standing by. A man dying does not count the faces round him. He thinks of the faces far off, the ones he is dying for. Whatever your brother thought, in the end, I will wager it was of you, and it was not blame. We do not blame the ones we love for being alive. We are glad of it. It is the one clean gladness left at the end, that someone we love is safe and warm and will go on. You gave your brother that, whether you were there or no. You were his safe, warm place he was dying to keep. Do not take that from yourself. It is a poor return for his dying. The Duke of Dunwood sat very still in the small, warm room. He did not trust his voice. When he had it again, he said only that he thought the surgeon might do the leg some good yet, and that he would call again if he might. And Tom said he would be glad of it, for the days were long. And the Duke went out into the cold, and stood a while in the lee of the ruin his own men had mended, and let the old grief move in him, changed. He had come to give the wounded man care, in his cold, private way. He had gone away given something instead, by a cripple in a ruin who had nothing to give but the truth. He understood, walking home, that he was not helping this family out of charity any longer, if he ever had been. He was tangled in it now, root and branch. And at the heart of the tangle, growing where nothing had grown in 2 years, was the maid who had made it all, whom he had still, to this hour, never once let know that he knew. Margaret could not understand it. She lay awake over it, as she had once lain awake over how to feed Tom at all. The food she no longer had to steal, appearing as if the house itself had decided to feed her brother. The surgeon who would take no fee and gave no name. The mended window, the seasoned wood. She was not a fool. She knew that such things do not fall from heaven, that somewhere there was a hand and a purpose behind them. And the not knowing frightened her, for in her experience, an unexplained kindness was only a trap that had not yet closed. She watched for the closing. She waited, as she had waited her whole hard year, for the price. And she found that the price did not come. And the not coming frightened her more than any price. She spoke of it to Tom one night, because there was no one else in the world she could speak of anything to. Someone knows, she said, kneeling by his fire, turning the good bread from the mysterious basket over in her hands. Someone knows about you, and about me, and about all of it. This bread did not come from the pig's trough. This is a gentleman's bread. And the surgeon. And your window. Someone has known for weeks, Tom, and said nothing, and only helped. She said the word as though it were in a foreign tongue. I do not understand it. In all my life, a person who knew a thing about me that could hurt me has used it. Every time. That is what knowing is for. And now someone knows everything. The very worst. the thing that could hang us both out for the county to stone, and instead of using it, they mend your window and send you broth. I lie awake, trying to see the trap in it, and I cannot see the trap. And not seeing the trap is worse than any trap, for a trap I could at least prepare for. Maybe there is no trap, said Tom. There is always a trap. There wasn't always a trap, said her brother gently, watching her with his terrible clear eyes. You have forgotten that, this year. Before it all went wrong, there were people who were only kind and wanted nothing, and you took it for granted, the way one does. It is the year that has taught you there is always a trap. It is not true. It only feels true, because the year was so hard. Meg. He put his thin hand over hers. What if it is only someone being kind? What would you do if you had to believe that a person had learned the worst of you and chosen to be kind and wanted nothing? Could you even bear it? Margaret did not answer him. She could not, for the honest answer frightened her more than any creditor ever had, and the honest answer was no. She did not know if she could bear it. She had built her whole hard year on the certainty that no one was to be trusted, that kindness was a lure, that she and Tom had only each other, and must expect nothing else. It had kept her upright. It had kept her fierce. And now a nameless hand was quietly dismantling the certainty, brick by brick, with bread and firewood. And she did not know what she would be, or how she would stand, if the certainty went. So she folded the thought away, as she folded everything away that she could not afford, and turned the talk to Tom's leg, and did not sleep that night either. So, across that late cold winter, and into the first of the spring, the Duke of Dunwood and the maid Margaret Fellbridge came to know one another, though neither of them would have called it that, and neither of them spoke a word of the thing that stood between them, which was that he knew her secret, and she did not know that he knew. He found reasons to be where she was. He had never in his life found reasons to be where a housemaid was, and he did it now clumsily, and told himself each time it was chance. He came to the library at the hour he knew she dusted it. He found her with a book in her hand, caught and mortified, braced for the reproof that was a servant's due for touching a master's books. "What are you reading?" he said instead. She told him because there was nothing else to do. And he took the book from her. He looked at it, and looked at her, and asked her a question about it. A real question, as though her answer mattered. It did matter, he was discovering. She answered it warily, and well, and better than half his educated guests could have. And he stood in his own library, talking to an under-housemaid about a book, for the better part of a quarter of an hour. Neither of them quite knew how it had happened, and both of them thought about it a good deal afterward. He came upon her again, in the still room, and in the long gallery, and in the walled garden, where she had begun, in her scant free minutes, to coax a few early things out of the neglected beds. Each time he saw more of the person under the servant. Each time the person under the servant was braver and drier and more alive and more entirely without self-pity than the last. And the Duke of Dunwood, who had not felt much in a room in 2 years, began to feel a very great deal. "You have a gift for it," he said to her once in the garden, watching her hands in the black earth. "The beds have been dead 10 years. My gardeners gave them up. Your gardeners have a great deal to do, and no reason to trouble over a corner no one sees, she said, not looking up. It only wanted someone with the time, and a reason to want a corner brought back to life. I have had, this year, a great need to bring things back to life. It steadies me, whether it is a garden or— She stopped herself, a beat too late. Or, said the Duke. Or anything, said Margaret, and turned the subject, and he let her turn it, though they both heard the word she had not said hanging in the cold, bright air between them. She began in those weeks to see him. Truly see him, past the cold and the title, and the year's certainty that no great man was to be trusted. She saw him the way the low always come to see the high. Without his knowing, he was seen. From doorways, and behind chairs, and across yards. She saw him pay a groom's doctor's bill, and swear the man to silence about who had paid it. She saw him stand a long time by the grave of an old dog, dead of age, that had been his brother's. She saw him, one raw morning, come on a scullery girl of 12, crying in a passage over a smashed dish she could not pay for. She saw him take out the price of the dish and press it on the child. He told her, in his flat, cold voice, to say nothing and dry her face. And he went by so fast, the child never knew whose hand had saved her. Margaret stood at the turn of the passage and watched it, unseen. And she felt the year's certainty crack another inch. For she knew that hand now. She had lived under that hand all winter. The hand that fed her brother and mended his window, and asked nothing, and let no one see. It was the same hand. It had been the same hand all along. She understood him then, or began to. He was not cold. He had made himself cold, the way she had made herself invisible, and for the same reason, because the world had taught him that what he was would be used against him. He gave in secret, because he could not bear to be thanked. He had been wanted for the wrong thing so long that he had stopped believing he could be wanted for the right one. He was, she saw, the loneliest man she had ever met, in the middle of the most crowded life. And he had spent his winter quietly, warming a stranger's ruin. He and she were the same creature. Two people who had learned to do their loving in the dark, where it could not be turned against them. It was the most dangerous thought she had had in a year, and she could not unthink it. "You are staring at me, Miss Felbridge," he said to her that evening, in the library, not looking up from his book. He had taken to calling her Miss Felbridge in private, weeks before the county ever heard it. "You have stared at me for a se'nnight. Have I grown a second head?" "I beg your pardon, Your Grace." She looked hard at the grate she was meant to be tending. "Do not beg my pardon. Tell me what you were thinking. You are the only person in this house who ever tells me a true thing. I have got to depend on it, which is careless of me." Margaret was quiet a moment. Then she told him a true thing, because he had asked, and because she was tired, that evening, of the armour. "I was thinking that I had you all wrong when I came here. I thought you the coldest man in England. Everyone says so. They are quite right." "They are quite wrong," said Margaret. "You only let them think it, because it is safer. I know the trick. I do the same. I let them all think me an upstart with airs, because it is safer than letting them ask what I'm really carrying." She met his green eyes across the firelit room, and did not look away, which cost her something. "I do not think you are cold at all, Your Grace. I think you are the warmest man in England, and terrified of it, and I think you have spent a great deal of trouble this year keeping a fire lit that you would let no one warm their hands at. That is what I was thinking. You asked. For a long moment, the Duke of Dunwood did not speak. The fire ticked, and something passed between the master and the maid that neither of them had a right to yet, and both of them felt. "Go to bed, Miss Felbridge," he said at last, low. "Before one of us says a thing we cannot unsay across a fireplace. There will be a right time and a right place for the saying of it. It is not here, and it is not yet, but it is coming. I give you fair warning. It is coming." She went, and she lay awake for the 4th night that week, not with fear, for once, but with the other thing, the folded-away thing, come unfolded at last, and refusing to fold back. His grandmother saw it before he did. The Dowager Duchess, Lady Wilhelmina, was 82 years old. She had buried a husband, 2 sons, and a grandson, and had emerged from all of it not soft but clear, the way old strong things go clear. She missed nothing that happened under her roof. She had watched her grandson come home from the war shut like a fist. She had watched him stay shut for 2 years. She had begun to despair of him, quietly, as the old despair of the young they will not live to see mended. And then, that winter, she watched the fist begin to open. She watched him look up when a certain housemaid came into a room. She watched the hard green eyes follow the girl, and go, for a moment, not hard. Lady Wilhelmina said nothing at all. She wanted her grandson living again more than she wanted anything left to her to want. So she watched, and drew her own conclusions, which were, as her conclusions generally were, correct. She tested the girl, once in her own way, to be sure. She had Margaret sent up to read to her of an afternoon, the dowager's eyes being too old for print. And she chose, on purpose, a hard book, a book of history in a close old hand, to see what the under-housemaid would make of it. Margaret read it beautifully. She read it as a woman reads who has been read to as a child by people who loved books, and who has read them since for herself in cold rooms, because there was nothing else warm to be had. And when she came to a passage the old woman thought too dry, and looked up to find her companion's eyes gone bright over it, the dowager set a small trap of her own. "You find that interesting?" she said. "Most would not. It is very dry." "It is not dry to me, my lady," said Margaret, forgetting herself for once. "It is about a family that lost everything, and how they bore it. I find I have a great interest this year in how people bear things." And then she heard what she had said. The shutter came down. She begged the dowager's pardon, and read on in a servant's flat voice. But it was too late. The old woman had seen through the shutter to the room behind it, and what she saw pleased her very much. That evening she said to her grandson, without preamble, in the way of the very old who have no time to spend on approach, "That new maid of yours is no maid. She has been gently bred and hard used. She is worth 10 of every simpering miss your poor mother ever paraded past you. And if you have the sense God gave a goose, you will have found that out for yourself already. I say no more. I am too old to meddle. But I have eyes, Jonathan. I have watched you die by inches for 2 years. This week I have watched you come back to life, and I know exactly what has done it, and it is not the spring." And she took up her cards, and would say no more, and left her grandson to sit with it, which he did half the night. And she drew Lady Celeste's conclusions for her too, in time. for Lady Celeste was watching the same thing, and reaching the same reading, and going, day by day, colder and more afraid. Lady Celeste had staked everything on Dunwood. She could feel him slipping, and she did not, at first, understand why. She had done everything right. She had been beautiful and gracious and available and suitable. Everything a duke could want in a duchess. And he had turned from her all the same. Turned, of all the impossible directions, toward a housemaid. She could not believe it, and then could not believe it. And the not believing curdled, as fear curdles in a certain kind of heart, into a cold determination. First to understand the thing, and then to destroy it. She began to watch the maid, as the Duke watched the maid, but with a different eye. Where the Duke had followed the little light, and found a reason to love, Lady Celeste followed it, in time, and found a weapon. She was cleverer than the housekeeper, and more patient than the cook. And she was driven by a fear that made her tireless. It took her only a little of the spring to learn what the Duke had learned in a night. She followed the maid to the cottage. She looked through the same gap in the same window. She saw the same broken soldier on the same pallet. And where the Duke had wept, Lady Celeste smiled. She had found, at last, the thing that would rid her of the maid forever, and leave the field to her. She carried it home across the dark park like a jewel, and she chose her moment with great care, and waited for the fullest and most public room she could find. She found it at the spring dinner, when the county came to Westridge. The long table was laid. The dowager sat at its head, the Duke at its foot, and 30 of the first people of the neighbourhood sat between, and Margaret Felbridge stood against the wall behind the chairs with the other servants, being furniture, waiting to carry away the soup. Lady Celeste rose to it as one rises to a thing long rehearsed. She waited until a lull. Then she said, pleasantly, pitching her lovely voice to Carrie, that she was afraid she had a painful duty, that she had wrestled with it, and had concluded that concealment would be the greater unkindness. And she laid it all before the table, sweetly, terribly, one piece at a time. The new maid, the Felbridge girl, standing there behind his Grace's chair, was a thief. Food had gone from the larder these many weeks. All the servants knew it. And more than a thief. There was a man the girl kept hidden in the old ruin on the moor, whom she visited alone by night, and fed with her stolen bread. She, Lady Celeste, had seen it with her own eyes, God help her, and had not wished to believe it. A thieving servant, hiding a strange man on the estate, deceiving the whole household under a false plain name. She was only a guest, she said. It grieved her past speaking to be the one to say it. But the Duke's honour, and the safety of his house, and the good name of every honest servant in it, required that the thing be dragged into the light. She looked with great gentleness at the maid frozen against the wall, and she asked, into the terrible silence, whether the girl denied it. The room turned. All of it. 30 faces to the maid against the wall. Margaret did not deny it. She stood very straight against the panelling, white to the lips, and did not deny a word, for not a word of it, in its bare facts, was false. She had taken the food. There was a man in the ruin. She did go to him alone by night. She looked at the sea of faces turned to her with that particular pleasure a comfortable room takes in the ruin of someone beneath it, and she understood that she was finished, that this was the closing of the trap she had waited a whole year for, that her only choice left, the last choice a ruined person owns, was the manner of her going. So she lifted her chin. She prepared to tell them the truth, all of it, and let it damn her or not as it would. She was done, she found, with hiding it, done with the armor, done obliging a world that had never once obliged her. But she did not get to speak. For at the foot of the table, the Duke of Dunwood rose to his feet. "That is enough," he said. He did not say it loudly. He had never in his life needed to say a thing loudly to be obeyed. The room fell utterly silent, and Lady Celeste's lovely, composed face faltered. This was not the shape of the thing she had rehearsed. In it, the Duke was shocked and grateful, the maid was cast out, and the field was clear. "Lady Celeste has told you," said the Duke into the silence, "that the food was stolen. It was not stolen. Every crumb of it was given by my order, this month past, and would have been given the first day had I been asked. She has told you there is a man hidden on my land. There is. His name is Thomas Felbridge. He was an ensign of these. He left a leg, and the best part of his health, in the same war that took my brother. He came home to find his family ruined and himself written down among the dead. And rather than let him rot in a poorhouse or a debtor's cell, his sister took a post blacking my grates, so that she might keep him alive with her own hands in the one shelter she could reach. He let that sit a moment in the still room. That is the crime that has been laid before you. A sister who would not let her wounded brother die. A woman who gave up her name, her place, her food, and her rest. Who asked nothing and told no one. Who endured being called a thief at my own table, rather than betray a soldier's shame. His green eyes went round the frozen room, and there was that in them now that no one at Westridge had seen in 2 years, and no one cared to meet. I have followed her myself. I have seen what Lady Celeste saw, and unlike Lady Celeste, I understood what I was looking at. I was looking at the bravest and most loyal person it has been my privilege to have under my roof. I will tell you plainly that I am ashamed to have needed a housemaid to teach me what loyalty to a brother looks like. And I would to God I had learned it 2 years sooner, in time to do my own. His voice was not quite steady on the last of it, and he did not care. He looked at the maid against the wall, white and shaking, and staring at him as though the floor had opened. For she understood now, all at once, the food and the surgeon and the mended window. She understood that he had known for months, and said nothing, and quietly fed her brother. And the understanding was too large to hold. She put out one hand against the panelling to keep her feet. "Miss Felbridge," said the Duke, and the whole table flinched at the miss. "Will you do me the honour of leaving this room, which is not fit for you, and going to your brother, who wants you? A carriage will take you. And tomorrow we will see about bringing him out of that ruin and into a bed in this house. He should have been there these 3 months. He would have been, if I had had the wit to arrange it without frightening you. Go to him. You need not black another grate as long as you live." Margaret went. She could not have spoken if the king had commanded it. She dropped the Duke a curtsy that was all she had left to give him. She went out of the terrible bright room with her back straight. She did not run. And she left 30 of the first people of the county sitting in a silence that would be 3 counties wide by morning. And Lady Celeste Marbury stood alone in the middle of it, her weapon turned in her hand. She understood that she had destroyed not the maid, but herself. A woman who tries to ruin a good servant out of jealousy, and is shown to the whole county for having done it, has ruined only her own name. There is no gathering that name up again. She left Westridge within the week, and the county within the month. She married, in the end, a much older man in a distant place, and was neither happy nor unhappy, only diminished. Only always, in the small hours, aware of the exact moment she had held everything she wanted in her hand, and crushed it by grasping too hard. She was not a monster. She was only a frightened woman who had staked her whole self on being chosen, and could not bear to lose, and had done a cruel thing out of that fear. There was no triumph in her fall that anyone at Westridge could find. Only the old, sad justice of a grasping hand closing on nothing. They brought Tom Felbridge into the great house the next day. He was carried careful up the grand stair by the Duke's own men, and put in a warm room with a broad window that looked over the park. The army surgeon came openly now. The good broth came from the kitchen, without anyone pretending it did not. And slowly, over the spring, the broken soldier began to mend. Not wholly. The leg was gone, and would not come back. There were nights, always, when the black water rose, and the shaking came, and he woke shouting from the foreign field. But he mended as much as such a man mends, which is to say, he began to want to live. And the wanting is the whole of the battle. It was his sister who had won it for him, in a ruin, with stolen bread. And it was the Duke who let her finish the winning, in a warm room, with everything a great house could give. Margaret watched her brother mend, and did not, at first, know what to do with herself. She had spent a year with every hour and every crust and every ounce of her strength spoken for. Now, all at once, they were not. She was not a maid any longer, though she did not quite know what she was instead. The Duke had said she need never black another grate, and she did not. But she could not simply become a guest in the house where she had carried the trays. She moved through those first strange weeks, in a kind of homeless country between the two, belonging to neither, watched by all. The one clean joy of those weeks was Tom. He was in the house now, in his warm room with the broad window, and she could go to him openly, in daylight, and sit with him as long as she liked, and it undid her a little every time. For a whole year she had seen her brother only in the dark, only in a ruin, only in stolen hours, always afraid. Now she could carry his dinner up a grand stair, on a proper tray, set it before him by a window full of light, and stay while he ate it. And neither of them had to listen for a step in the dark. "Look at you," Tom said to her, the first fine morning, propped up to watch the park. "A whole year you have been grey as a ghost, and cross as two sticks, and thin as a rail, and now there is colour in your face. You have been eating. Do not think I have not noticed. You have been eating your own dinner at last, instead of bringing it all to me. It is the best sight I have had since I came home." He grinned, the old grin, the golden boy grin the war had not quite killed. "It is that Duke. You have gone soft over the Duke." "I have not gone soft over anyone," said Margaret, arranging his blanket with unnecessary force. "I am grateful to his grace. That is all. He has been very good to us, and I am grateful, as any person would be." "You are the worst liar in England," said Tom comfortably. "You always were. You could never keep a thing off your face for 2 minutes together. Do you remember when you broke Papa's watch and tried to say the cat did it, and we had no cat? You have the watch and cat face on you now, Meg, every time his name is said. Gratitude. He snorted. I have watched you be grateful to people. You go stiff and correct, and you cannot get away from them fast enough. You do not go pink and cross and forget how to fold a blanket. Margaret did not answer that, because there was no answer to it that was not a confession. And she was not ready, yet even with Tom, even with herself, to make the confession. She had spent a year forbidding herself to want anything beyond her brother's life. The habit of not wanting was the strongest thing she owned, stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. And she found that laying it down was the hardest work she had ever done, harder than the grates, harder than the stealing, harder than the long walks across the dark. To let herself want the Duke of Dunwood was to let herself be hurt again. She had been hurt so thoroughly, so many times, in one short year. The wanting felt less like hope than like walking back into a house that had already fallen on her once. But the colour was in her face, whatever she told Tom. And the habit of not wanting, for the first time in a year, had begun to lose. It was the dowager who ended it. The old are impatient, and have no time to waste on delicacy. Lady Wilhelmina sent for Margaret. She looked her over with the bright, hard eyes that had buried 3 generations, and said, without preamble, that she was in want of a companion. She had outlived every friend she ever had, and most of her relations. The girl would do, if the girl had sense. They would suit or they would not, but they might as well find out. It was the same kindness, dressed as need. Margaret saw straight through it, and was grateful past speaking. She became the dowager's companion. And so she had a place, and a name, and a footing in the house that was neither servant nor stranger. She could look the Duke of Dunwood in the eye at last, as something like an equal, which was, the old woman knew perfectly well, the entire point. And the Duke, freed at last from the great wrong that had stood between them, that he was master, and she was maid, and no honest thing could be said across that gulf, began to court her, badly, having no practice at it, and she to be courted warily, having every reason in the world to trust no man, and one entirely new reason to wish to trust this one. He told her, one evening in the walled garden where she had brought the dead beds back to life, the thing he had never told anyone. I had a brother, he said. It was the first time in 2 years he had said it aloud. It came hard. She did not help him, only waited, which was the help he needed. Harry. He was everything I am not. Bright and warm and easy and loved. My God, how he was loved. He went for a soldier, laughing, and I let him go. I bought his commission and paid his debts and gave him everything the dukedom could give. And I told myself that was doing my part. And he died in the mud 2 years ago. Alone, among strangers. No one held his face in the dark and told him he was worth everything and would live. I was here, being a duke, safe. I did not go with him. I have not forgiven myself, and I do not expect to. He looked at her. And then I followed a light across my own park, expecting to catch a thief. And I found a woman doing for her brother the thing I did not do for mine, refusing the world its convenience, staying, paying. You cannot know what it was, to stand in the dark and watch you keep him alive by main force. It was the worst hour of my life, and it was the hour my life began again. You gave me back something I had lost 2 years before, and you did not even know I was there. I have been trying ever since to find a way to tell you what that is worth to me. I am no good at telling. I am better at doing things quietly and letting no one see. But you should know it. So I am telling you badly, in a garden, which is the best I can do. Margaret was quiet a long moment. Then she said, "The food, the surgeon, the window, it was you. All winter, it was you. It was me. You knew for months. You knew what I was and where I went, and you said nothing. And you fed my brother. And you let me keep my secret. And you asked for nothing. I did not know how to offer you help without frightening you," he said simply. "You were like a wild thing that has been trapped before. Any move too quick, and you would have bolted and taken him into some worse hiding, and I could not bear the risk of it. So I did it quietly, and waited, and hoped there would come a day I could tell you. Lady Celeste rather forced the day. I am not sorry. I was tired of the silence. And Margaret Felbridge, who had trusted no one but a dying brother for a hard year, stood in the garden she had brought back to life. She understood that she was being offered the one thing she had never once let herself want, because wanting it had seemed the surest way to lose everything, and that the man offering it had proved himself, not in words, which are cheap, but in a whole winter of quiet deeds done for a stranger, he owed nothing, which are not. "I have nothing," she said. "You understand that. I have no name that is worth anything, no fortune, no family, but a broken soldier who will need care all his life. I was blacking your grates a month ago. The county will never let you forget it. If you are asking me what I think you are asking me, you must know exactly what you are asking for, and what it will cost you. I will not let you do it in a burst of feeling in a garden, and repent it at leisure. I have thought of nothing else for 3 months, said the Duke of Dunwood. I have counted every cost there is to count, and I find I do not care for any of them. I have been a duke all my life, wanted for the wrong thing by everyone who ever came near me, and in 30 years you are the first person who never wanted a single thing from me, who did not even know I existed while you were busy being the bravest soul in Kent. I have had enough of being wanted for the wrong thing. I should like, for once, to be wanted for the right one. Or not at all. Marry me, Margaret. Not because you must, for you need not. Your brother is safe now, whatever you answer. I have seen to that, and will see to it always. Ask me nothing. Marry me because you would. If you would. She did not answer him that evening. She made him wait, not out of cruelty, but because she had made herself a promise, in the worst of the year, that she would never again let need or fear make her choices for her. She would not break it even for him. Even for this. She waited until her brother was strong enough to be asked his opinion, and asked it. And Tom Felbridge owed this man his life, and his sister's honour both. He wept, and said that if she did not marry the Duke of Dunwood, he would get up on his one leg and beat her. Which was the most like his old self he had been since the war, and made them both laugh, and made Margaret cry, and settled it more surely than any argument could have. And she waited until she was sure, entirely sure, standing on her own feet, and not the Duke's. Sure that the thing she felt was not gratitude, which fades, and not relief, which is not love, but the true thing. the thing that had begun the first time he asked her what she read as though it mattered, and had grown all through a spring of clumsy courting in a walled garden. When she was sure, she went to him and told him so plainly, for plainness was the truest coin she had. "You never once used what you knew against me," she said. "You held my whole secret in your hand for 3 months, the thing that could have ruined me and Tom both. Every day you could have used it, to press me, to frighten me, to buy me, and you never did. You only fed my brother, and mended his window, and waited for me to be safe enough to be asked. Do you know how rare that is in a man who holds power over a woman with none? It is so rare I did not believe it existed. I had decided it did not exist. And then you went and existed. You have ruined all my hard-won certainty about the wickedness of the world. And I find I cannot even be sorry." She took his hand, the first time she had ever reached for it. "Yes, Jonathan, I would. I do. I will. Not because I must, because I would. And because you are the only man living who ever gave me the freedom to say so, by making sure I did not need to. Ask me anything else you like. The answer to all of it is yes." They were not married at once. The world had to be brought round, and a duke does not marry his grandmother's companion, who was lately his housemaid, without the world requiring a good deal of bringing round. But the dowager set herself to the bringing round with the relish of a very old woman who has waited a long time to enjoy herself. Between her ancient name and her sharp tongue, and the plain fact of the Duke's immovable will, the county came, in the end, as counties do, grumbling, and then curious, and then, once it saw which way the wind blew, warmly insistent that it had always thought Miss Felbridge a most superior young woman, and had said so from the first. Which was a lie, and which everyone agreed to believe. They were married at Westridge in the summer, in the small grey church at the park's edge, and it was Tom Felbridge who gave his sister away. He would not be carried to do it, and he would not use 2 crutches where one would serve. He stood at the church door on his one leg and his one crutch, in a good new coat, straight as the soldier he had been. And he walked his sister up the short aisle at a pace that cost him a great deal, and that he would not have shortened by an inch. The county, which had come to gawp, found itself, rather against its will, moved. There is nothing so disarming as courage worn plainly. The sight of the ruined ensign giving away the housemaid to the Duke undid the last of the county's resistance, more thoroughly than any amount of the dowager's terrorizing had managed. "I told you you would dance again," Margaret whispered to him at the church door when it was done. Her eyes were streaming, and her voice was not steady at all for once. Her whole gift of steadiness had deserted her on the one day she did not need it. "I told you, in the ruin. I promised. Not this year. But you will." "Not this year," Tom agreed, grinning his golden grin, leaning on his crutch and on his new brother's steady arm both. "But you have got yourself a duke, Meg, and a duke can find a man a very good leg-maker in London, I am told. Give me a 12-month. I shall stand up at your first ball at Westridge, and I shall dance one dance, badly, with my sister the Duchess, and every soul in 3 counties will pretend not to weep, and fail. It is a thing to live for. You always did say I wanted a thing to live for." He looked at her, and the grin went, for a moment, into something graver and truer. "You gave me one, Meg. In the dark, when I begged you to let me die. You would not. Nobody in the history of the world was ever loved harder than you loved me, in that ruin, on that stolen bread. I will spend the rest of the life you would not let me throw away trying to be worth it. Now go and marry your duke properly, and stop crying on my new coat. There is a light that moves across the park at Westridge still, of an evening, if the old stories are true. But it does not go to a ruin any longer, and it does not go in secret, and it is not carried by a frightened girl with stolen bread. The old keeper's cottage was pulled down, and a good snug house built on the spot. Tom Felbridge lives in it, mending as much as he will ever mend, with a man to help him, and a garden his sister planted. And of an evening, when the Duchess of Dunwood walks out from the great house to sit an hour with her brother, she carries a lantern across the dark park. Openly, the way she once carried it in fear. The little light goes straight and steady across the black park, as it always went, to something it goes to someone it loves. Only now, when it comes to the small, snug house, the windows are lit to meet it, warm and unhidden. There is a good supper on the table that no one had to steal. The light does not have to hide behind sacking any more, and neither, at last, does anyone in it. The Duke of Dunwood had gone out one evening in cold suspicion to follow a servant's secret and catch a thief. What he found out explained everything, as the county would say for years afterward, not knowing the half of what it explained. It explained the food, the walking, the name, the thinness. It explained the guardedness of the strange fine housemaid at the edge of the moor. And it explained, to one hard-shut heart, that had followed the little light across the dark, the thing that heart had forgotten and been given back. That love is not a thing you say. It is a thing you do. Quietly, in the cold, again and again, for someone who cannot pay you back, asking nothing, telling no one, keeping the light steady all the way across the dark. Thank you for listening to the story